Hello. How are you?
Excellent.
You're
What's not to love? We've got
you're on
three
the
back to me.
Titanic,
I'm not on it. I'm just off it actually.
swimming around with the music. I know what you're doing. You're just, kind of rolling with the waves, doing all that.
I, I'm really good at holding my breath in.
I guess so. I guess so. Well, welcome to everybody. My name is Ann Merchant, and I work for the National Academy of Sciences. And
I'm Rick Lovard. I am the program director of the Science and Entertainment Exchange, a program of the National Academy of Sciences.
And we are both very glad that you are here for our event today. And of course, Rick always picks his backgrounds to be very thematically appropriate. And so, of course, that's the deep dive portion of our program. And we have exactly the right person to talk about that. But we don't get to start our event. We don't get to turn it over to the person, which is why you are here, that is the main event, until we do our job. And our job is to first talk a little bit about our employer, because that's what puts our paycheck in our bank account every 2 weeks. So we got to do that. We got to sing for our supper, but we like doing it because we're very proud of the institution that we work for. And I always like to say a little bit about that, the National Academy of Sciences, the institution that was created more than 150 years ago to essentially provide a good way for the federal government and for any policymaker actually to be able to use the resources to create good policy, to look at the expertise, the unbiased, evidence-based expertise provided by a place like the National Academy of Sciences that sits outside the formal framework of the federal government. And so this was the idea that Abraham Lincoln had, as I think I've said before, in the travail of the Civil War, which is how we put it on our website. And we've been very busy over the last year with a lot of the work that we've been doing on the pandemic. But we've also been doing a lot of other things. And so I was looking, as I always do prior to our events, at our website and looking at some of the work that we've been doing. One of the recent reports that we've done is on the financial implications of discarded drugs. It turns out that there are a lot of drugs that are packaged up in single dose usage kind of vials, but they don't always match what's actually being used. And so a lot of the drugs are discarded. This tends to happen apparently with cancer drugs and with some drugs that are used for arthritis. And so what are the implications of the waste that comes from that? And so the Academy is looking at solutions to this problem. The other thing, and this is extremely relevant after the power grid issues that happened in Texas with all of the freezing and the snow, that we have created a set of recommendations for an updated US electric grid and how we can make that grid more efficient, more sustainable, more reliable, more equitable. And so there is a new, and I believe it was a congressionally mandated study to look at the way we could create a better power grid. So our work is very relevant, not just for COVID, but for a variety of policies that are informed by science, engineering, and medicine. So not everybody reads our big 400-page congressionally mandated or otherwise reports, and that's why programs like the Science and Entertainment Exchange exists. It's why the whole portfolio of what we call our creative engagement programs exist. And so Rick is the director, as he said, of the Science and Entertainment Exchange. It's one of the longest standing outreach programs that we have. And I'm going to turn it over to you, as I always do, to explain the exchange.
Yeah, so if you're a writer, producer, director, a storyteller, you're a media maker of any sort, making a book, a feature film, a TV show, a video game, you have a question about science, you can call us at 844-NEED-SCI or email me or my colleague Sachi Gerben, and we will connect you to a field expert who knows what they're talking about and can put it in the context of your story. We've done over 3,300 consults since we opened our doors, and 300 of these events, actually more than that now. I need a new count.
I know.
Yeah, I know. But we've worked on Avengers Infinity War, Black Panther, Captain Marvel, Songbird. A lot of times we work really early in the process. Today, I was actually reminded by a writer that we worked on Chernobyl. So if you haven't seen that one on HBO Max, there's a really good one that I watched in the first months of the pandemic that I would definitely recommend. If you are a STEM professional and you're just hearing about our mission and you're like, wow, I would really love to be connected to some storytellers. I'd love to, engage with the program, we would love to hear from you. So please, reach out at the exchange at nas.edu or to my email or Sachi's email. I think she's put our contact information up in the chat thread here. And I want to do a couple quick things. I want to thank Ameche, as always, for your amazing AV skills and talents. Thank you. We couldn't do these events without you. The whole office in DC, Courtney Sloan and Jeff Fishman, also in LA, Sachi Gerben. And I want to thank our sponsors, Howard Hughes Medical Institute, who makes these events possible, the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, Walt Disney Company, Film Nation, Google, Lida Hill Foundation, Corteva, and individual donors like you. Many of you gave today. Thank you so much. And thank you especially to those who joined at the supporter level. We absolutely appreciate it. Our coins have been ordered. They're on the way. They're coming this month, and we will get those out to you. And also, if you are an exchange supporter, then you should have gotten an invite to a special video VIP session afterwards. You can also get into that session if you got one of our special session tickets, which were, I think, $20 for this event. So thank you so much. If you did that, that money goes directly back into the programming and to keeping us on these airwaves to talk to you each week. And so for today, we're going to hand it over as quickly as possible to David Gallo, and we'll tell you a little bit more about him. But if at any moment you have a question, then please put it in the Q&A either down here or up here, depending on what format you're watching us in. And I will be tracking that. We're going to have like 15 or 20 minutes, I think, at the end, where I will be rapid fire asking as many of your questions as I humanly possibly can. If we don't get to your question, I'm very sorry. You guys, our audience is amazing at asking just incredible questions. So thank you for that. If you did get the VIP ticket, or you are a retreat alumni or a supporter of the exchange, and you want to go to the added VIP at the back end of the event for the 30 minutes after, please send an email to the exchange at nas.edu, and we'll make sure that you get the link. I think that's it. I think that's all I got in for today.
All right. Well, and of course, the last thing we do, maybe we should be calling it our deep dive. I think we just call it our rabbit hole. A couple of things we want to recommend, because like many of you, when we're home and we're not out doing the things we usually do, we're kind of noodling around on our laptops, looking at things. One of the things that I've been doing, somebody was chiding me today that if I was home for another year, I'd have a whole fleet of goats from which I could cull my own fiber and spin my own yarn. But I was very happy because before it got too warm, I did finish knitting this sweater. So I really was happy with the way that this turned out. This is a pattern called Goldwing, if there are any knitters out there, by Jennifer Steingass. And it came out really nicely. I was really happy. I was afraid that my sleeves were actually going to be a little long, but they weren't, and I was really happy with it. So, and it's nice and soft and fits well. So I was happy with that. And if you're a knitter, you know it's not always a guarantee. You put a lot of work into something, and you're never quite sure. But the other thing that we've been doing, and this is something Rick and I both wanted to recommend, a game, because we're both board game players and we really like board games. And we are working on developing a board game out of LabX, one of our other creative engagement programs. And I had been talking with our game developers, and I said, there's a game called Wingspan, and I think I might be too stupid to play it because I can't figure it out. And it's just really, I don't know. I didn't find it fun. So they recommended to me a game called Cat Lady, which sounds completely stupid. And if I also tell you that you're putting cats in costumes and you are finding games for them to play and you're feeding them, but not feeding them too much, I know it sounds completely ridiculous, but there is a lot of strategy in this game. It goes really fast and it's very competitive once you figure it out. It can be played with 2 players or multiple players, and it's really fun. And if you do get the deluxe version, which I sprung for, but I understand that it's out of stock right now, you can name your own cats. That's a bonus. So I strongly recommend Cat Lady, and you don't even have to like cats, because I know people that don't like cats and they find it fun. But as a person who recently acquired a cat, I strongly recommend it to you, Rick Lovard.
I'm going to get the Cat Lady, but Ann, I got to say, seeing you in that sweater just reminds me that I have no useful skills. None. I am going to recommend this game. This is a great, extremely simple, very strategic game. that you play with 2 players, which is good if you're in lockdown with your significant other. It's called Corridor. It's very simple. I like the fact that the game board itself is made of wood. The rules are really easy. You just try to get to the other side of the board while keeping your opponent from getting to the other side. You can only do one of 2 things each move, but it's like maddeningly strategic in the way it's played. And my wife is a very strategic lady. Many of you know her, and she is a formidable opponent. So anyway, I would recommend Corridor, and you should check it out.
How often have you won?
With Corridor, I'm maybe at like 40%, which is good, which is really good in the household.
All right. Good job.
Yeah.
And didn't you also have a book?
Oh, you want me to? Okay. All right. I will do the book too. So I got to recommend this to you guys. This is Death and Company. This is a very, very fancy craft cocktail bar. I miss craft cocktail bars, and I miss going out to cocktails with friends these days. And so what we've been doing is we have been picking a cocktail, which you can sort of see when I open the book. We've been picking a cocktail with friends, and then we've all been getting the ingredients and going on and making the cocktails together. And it is a really nice way to sort of communally sort of have the experience of a craft cocktail. But this Death and Company book has a lot of great recipes. I highly recommend it.
So that's our rabbit hole, but now we have to do the deep dive. And of course, that's what you're all here for, and our deep dive. And Dave told us nobody had ever used that ridiculous pun for a title of his talk, but leave it to us. So we are very happy to welcome David Gallo to our virtual stage, but it is not the first time that he has been on our stage. In fact, you were there for the launch of the Science and Entertainment Exchange 12 years ago, more than 12 years ago in Los Angeles. That was the first time I think that we met, was at the launch of the exchange. And we were really happy that you were there with all your bag of tricks. You had big giant monitors that you had brought in, and lots of amazing footage that you were showing everyone, and your bag of tricks was a big lure to our audience that was very interested in what you had to show everyone. And that was it. We got our claws in you, and we've never let you go, and we keep dragging you back and having you tell amazing stories of your deep sea adventures, but also just the fact that, I mean, you are an amazing storyteller with great things to talk about. But I don't think I'm ever going to forget the fact that you told us about the fact that you were a person that grew up in an inland environment. It wasn't like you walked the shores of distant oceans, and that's what got you hooked. So a guy that can grow up in New York, and I think what you told me your first job was as a shoe salesman.
7 years selling shoes. Yeah.
I
miss it.
Well, I think that you've got great stories for us today. We're going to turn it over to you, and we're always, as always, thankful that you are here. So take it away.
I'm going to talk about my game first. It's called "What Do All These Buttons Do?" We're about to find out. First, thank you, Ann and Rick, and your entire staff for inviting me. And let's see if I can get this thing going properly. Aha! And now I need to do one more thing. Just a moment. So I get my... Okay, you're all familiar with this, our home planet. And the thing I want to say about this more than anything is that it's a snapshot of the planet. The planet's so dynamic, and you know this. It's constantly in motion. It's been around for about 5 billion years, and it's been changing for 5 billion years. The plates change, the face of the Earth changes constantly. Earthquakes and volcanoes reminding of that, and the climate changes constantly, and we've had an impact into that, but it's been changing for again billions of years. So it's a planet of change. And the thing about this is that we take it for granted, that image, and it's something we shouldn't do, because when you think of all the technology that's gone into it, it's pretty amazing, and nothing guaranteed us as a species that we could do that. The planet is covered with, we've explored in 70% oceans, and we've only explored a few percent. And you can see the numbers bounce around 8%, 9%, 10%. Not a lot, maybe a lot less than that, because mostly that's speaking about the sea floor and very little about the water above it. I think a lot of people think that it's a big blue fishbowl, and it's not. If you took away the water, that's what you see. And this is a map done by Bruce Hazen and Marie Tharp some time ago. And what amazes me, if you look at the bottom, topography, we've only explored a few percent, and yet we find the world's greatest mountain range. If you look at the Atlantic, you'll see the red dot, I hope. That's the world's greatest mountain range, the mid-ocean ridge, 50,000 miles long. We find the deepest and widest valleys that cut across that ridge, thousands of deep valleys that dwarf the Grand Canyon, 2 or 3 times wider, 2 or 3 times deeper, thousands of times longer. We find underwater rivers. We call them currents at the surface, but some of them run deep. And when they do that, they go over some of that incredible topography. And actually, the largest waterfall on Earth is right here between Iceland and Greenland, as far as we know. It dwarfs Angel Falls or anything we've got up here under the sun. So right here, where cold Arctic water goes over a huge cliff and into the Atlantic Ocean. So another misconception about the planet is that we understand the ocean. So you can't understand something if you don't first explore it. And let's go to the next slide. Here we go. There we are. All right, so that's a close-up of that mountain range. I wanted to give you a view of what it looks like up close. And here again is the mountain range. You'll see that the shape of it, this fits right into this here on North America, also in this bit of Africa. This bit of South America fits right here. Africa goes here. So these were all together in that thing called Pangea. And for about 180 million years, on the order of that, they've been moving apart. They're still moving apart. And in between is this long volcanic axis. And we've known about that for some time. And we never, because it's deep, average depth of the ocean is about 2.5 miles. To the top of this, it's about 1 mile, but there's a valley you can see that runs along the top. That valley goes down 2, 3, 4 miles, incredibly deep. And on that valley, it's like a lost world, is where we find these incredible hydrothermal vents sitting down there in the darkness. And we were sure there'd be no life once you get below the sunlight of the ocean. But instead, we find immense amounts of life in that part of the world. Showing you this because this is called the JEPCO Map and Chart Series. It's actual bathymetry rather than an artist representation. And it doesn't show the ridge the way it is, but this ridge really does dwarf, this mountain range dwarfs the Alps, actually rivals the Himalayas in some ways. And I want to show you this because there's a couple of other things I want to point out about the planet. For instance, this little bit between Spain and Africa, if you pinch Gibraltar off, this dries up completely. It's happened many times in the past. When this dries up completely, it leaves huge deposits of salt back here, which means it takes that salt out of the ocean, which means that the oceans are less salty, so they freeze easier, and the glaciers and everything else move south, and sea level drops. All because of this little thing pinching off right here has a global impact. This bit here, Panama, it wasn't always there. A couple million years ago, it slid down the coast and blocked this off. There used to be currents running through here. This too, this little bit changed circulation on the whole planet, and that had implications on climate. So it's a planet of subtleties, but they have dramatic impact. The bottom line here is that in that few percent of the oceans, we find all these things that are exciting. Oceanography or ocean exploration, there's 2 parts to it. One is the excitement of exploration, because we don't know what we're going to find next for the most part. A lot of our assumptions have been wrong about life on Earth and about the shape of and the topography of the seafloor. The other part is the importance of understanding it. And we're finding out now that the oceans are incredibly important. We'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. To do oceanography or ocean exploration in the deep ocean means you have to have a ship to get out there. You're talking sometimes about going out 1,000 miles. Ships go about 10 miles an hour, sometimes 11, sometimes 12. Takes a long time to get out to the middle of the ocean. That's where that mountain range is. And then because if you're working deep, 1 mile, 2 miles, 3 miles, 5 miles, 11 miles, you need to have something to get down there. Sometimes you lower equipment over the side, a robot, for instance, you drop over the side. Other times, probably the most romantic and dramatic way to go is to get in a sub. And this Woods Hole ship, the Atlantis, and it's a support ship for that thing in the foreground, which is a submersible Elvin. a very famous submarine, holds 3 people, and a typical elven dive. Well, I'll show you something in a moment for an elven dive. So this for many,
Dave,
many
I'm
years.
going to interrupt you for just one sec because we've noticed that you're in presenter mode and we see 2 of your slides instead of 1. So, and a couple of folks are saying, well, we want your slides to be big so we can see them.
Oh, well, how could I get in presenter mode? All right, let's go back here. Let's go back here, share screen. So it's not here and there. Still 2?
Yes, you have done it.
Oh, that's good. That's all right.
It is.
No bueno. Okay, good. Sorry about that, everybody. In the past, this was the way to go. It was mostly a world of academics. For the longest time, it was just a few people and organizations in the North America, mostly Woods Hole Oceanographic, with a manned submersible, human-occupied submarine. The French, Russians later on. But today, you have people like James Cameron, an individual that built his own submarine, went to the greatest ocean depths, 7 miles, which is incredible. That's when you look into the air and see a jet with a vapor trail. That's about what we're talking about, 5, 6, 7 miles. And he went there himself before academics did. It was the second time anyone's visited the trenches. Now, Victor Vescovo's gone beyond that. Another individual had a submarine built, and he's had many, many dives in the deepest parts of the ocean. Eric Schmidt, Ray Dalio, all of these people have certain dedication and devotion to exploring the oceans, and they've all funded their own organizations and technology to go out there and do research. I think it's great because in a way, it allows people to do risky things. Science, especially in the ocean, when you go out to sea, it's expensive, and you really need to come back with the goods. You can't take risks too often. In their case, they can take risks, and I think the future is bright with them doing things that we normally would not see or do. This is a typical launch of, that's again, Elven in the water. And let's see if I can get this video to run. Yeah. So the important thing about here is you start to drift down into the blackness. You go through what we call the twilight zone. And we find out that ocean, that layer is full of life. And it's incredible life. Jellies in every shape and size and color, all with their own bioluminescence. That's how they communicate, like fireflies in the night. And then you get all the way down to the bottom. These are those hydrothermal vents I talked about. Incredibly toxic, and yet deep, lots of pressure. We find communities of life that rival the tropical rainforest. There you go. There's one of them. The red things are called tube worms. In one spot, 300 some odd species, about 297 never been seen before. So there's something about the deep sea and that kind of exploration. As I said before, you don't know what's just beyond the lights of the submarine or the robot. This is kind of neat. That's an underwater lake. And so it's saltier than the water above it, but you can see it's very distinct. There's a haze above it. You're going over the shoreline right now. You'll see it coming into view again. Those are methane bubbles. So in the distance, that's another shoreline. There you go. There's an eel swimming above that underwater lake. And if that eel won't go in that water, and there's animals in that water that won't come up into the ocean, and you can see the waves. Those are mussels that live along the shore, just like a lake on land, but it's at the bottom of the sea. So full of surprises. Now, sometimes when we dive into the deep ocean, we know what we're looking for, so it's not a surprise. And one of those things has been Titanic, found in 1986, 85 by Bob Ballard and a team from Woods Hole and French team, and then explored in 1986. And I had the pleasure of co-leading an expedition to Titanic in 2010. And our mission was to map the entire wreck site, which was incredibly boring in a way, because our mission was not to chase exciting things, but to systematically go back and forth, like mowing the lawn or cutting the grass or painting a wall, and make sure we get everything inside on the ship and then on the debris field around the ship. That's just one example. That's the starboard side, right side of the Titanic. And around inside here is, I hope you can see that I lost my laser pointer, but that's this is not the gash from the iceberg. This is about where the ship hit the iceberg. This is from the ship impacting the bottom. But now we can zoom in, and these little white things are crabs, and we can zoom right in on those. It's just an incredible data set. And every time you see a mosaic like this, because water absorbs light very quickly, you're looking at hundreds of thousands in some cases of images mosaic together. So it's not always just the robot or the submarine that makes a difference in our exploration. Sometimes it's about the enabling technology, navigation, telemetry, the things like that. In the ocean, we can't use radio waves, so any kind of communications has to be with sound. We can't use lights are difficult, and power we have to bring or pipe it down through a cable. So we're kind of hamstrung in that way. And when I get together with astronomers and the like, I always tell them, you guys can see you can see infinity, and we can't see our hand in front of our face. And we have to deal with pressure that's sometimes 15, 16, 17,000 pounds per square inch, 1,000 times more than the pressure up here under the sun on land. And from here to Mars is, a couple of atmospheres difference in pressure. So it's not that we don't have all the thunder and all that of space exploration, but we do have engineering deal of feats that we have to overcome in order to get to the bottom of the ocean. Another thing that we looked for that we knew was there, it was a question of finding it. In fact, this is Air France Flight 447, 2009. It was on the way from Rio to Paris, and it crashed in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, right on top of that underwater mountain range. The French looked for it right away, and they mounted a search for it right away. They never had the opportunity to really think about, they were just told, get out there and find it. And so they never had an opportunity to sit back and strategize. And I understand that completely, because they were still in the search phase at that point. And then we got involved, luckily, because we had some new technology, some torpedo-shaped robots, the ones that we used on Titanic, in fact, that could make that kind of a map back and forth and plow a field with incredible accuracy. And we had decades of working in the underwater mountains. Very few people had those two things: new technology, experience working in the mountains. So the terrain wasn't a surprise to us. To most people, it would be, because you're working in mountains that are, imagine like the Alps at nighttime, and you're looking for something. If it's a black box, is about the size of a shoebox, a little bit bigger than a shoebox. With a flashlight. So, it's a very difficult thing to do. And we knew the only way to do it was to do it systematically. And fortunately, we were able to get out there. And it took a while. I mean, if you look at the media, it said we took two years to do it. The first year, we had a couple months to find it and didn't find it. And we were following all sorts of tips on where it might be, and places where people said, this is where we think it is. And unfortunately, it wasn't there. And I was making the case at that point that if the needle's in the haystack, if it's in that haystack, we'll find it. If it's not in the haystack, no matter what we do, we're not going to find it. In those cases, it was not in the haystack. And so the second, luckily, we were given a second chance to go back out. And this time we went where we wanted to go. And within about a week's time, the plane was found. I wasn't on board the ship. I had just left the ship in Brazil and come back to Woods Hole. And I was actually pulling in the driveway when the phone rang, and it was the crew on board the ship to say that they had found the plane, which was pretty amazing to me, because we found the black boxes as well, turned them over to the French, and now we know what happened to that plane. Otherwise, it would have been a mystery pretty much forever. Like this. There's a plane that we know that's out there, Malaysian Airlines 370. And, I know you know about this. It disappeared. And the question is, where did it go? Did it go east? Did it go west? Did it go south? The evidence is that it was airborne for 5, 6, 7 hours. And there was an immense search done, again, like in our case, based on some information. And the plane wasn't there. And months and months were spent looking for the plane. it's problematic because if you're looking for something and you don't find it, especially in ocean work where you're working with sound for the most part and echoes, you have to wonder, did we miss it? And that's a horrible thing, because if you missed it, that there's really no reason to go back and look at an area again. So you've got to be, it's better to go slow and careful and hopefully find it rather than to go quick and cover a lot of ground. It's a very difficult thing to do, and it's anything but routine. After Air France, there were people that said, organizations that said, we'll track planes from now on. Right now, we don't really track planes the way we should. Every minute is about 10 miles in a plane, and that's a huge circle. Every 10 miles, that circle gets bigger and bigger to search. And, right now we don't record the location anywhere near that. That was Air France. And then this happened. And once again, there we are looking at this incredible mess about where did the plane go. And, thank God, and I hope this doesn't represent a curse, but it's been a while since a plane crashed in the open ocean. But if it were to happen today, we're better off because we have better technology. But again, not knowing where, there's no reason why we don't know where that aircraft is and what we're doing, except to save some money. That's my own personal opinion. So we'll see. I want to say a little bit about this, about looking for things out on the ocean. This is Shackleton, and it's always been in the back of my mind. I retired from Woods Hole a few years ago. I'm busier than ever, though. And this is like the Mount Everest in many ways for ocean exploration. This is Shackleton in England, and we're talking about 1900s, 1910, 1912, up to 1916. That's him, all dapper. This is him after during his trip to Antarctica. This is his ship, the Endeavour. That's how it began. This is the ship Endeavour after the trip to Antarctica. Bottom line is he and his crew, 27 people, I think it was 27 plus a stowaway, got stuck in the ice. The idea was to land on the shore of Antarctica and then cross the continent through the South Pole to the other side. It was called the International Transantarctic Expedition. And again, they got stuck in the sea ice. And for months and months and months, more than a year, they were either stuck on the ship. Eventually it sank. This is just before it sank. And then they lived in ice camps for months and months and months. And eventually Shackleton got his crew up to an island called Elephant Island, which is a small island, nothing there, but at least they were on land, which is amazing to live that long on the ice to survive. And then Shackleton and a few others went on a long sea journey to South Georgia Island, where there was a fishing village. Incredible journey, and an open boat in some of the roughest water on the planet. But he made it there, and then he left most of his crew back on Elephant Island. 4 times he tried to go back, 3 times failed, 4th time got there, and rescued every person on that island. He never lost a single man on that expedition, which is absolutely stunning that he could do that. So, bottom line is this ship is somewhere, if you can see my pointer, it's right here in the Weddell Sea, right inside here. And the thing is that it's covered with ice, and the ice can be 10 feet thick, so it's tough to get to. You could end up like Shackleton and his endurance, stuck in the ice. Even with icebreakers, it's tough to penetrate into the ice pack that far. It's a long way from the edge of the ice. It's, as I said, the ice is thick, so you have to actually drill through the ice to get into the open water. And then it sits at about same depth as Titanic, 3,000, 4,000 meters deep. So you've got to have a vehicle that can go that deep. And those vehicles are typically pretty big to go that deep. The deeper you go, the higher the pressure, the bigger the vehicle has to be to accommodate the pressure, thicker containers for all the instruments. So the mission is get to that spot with a vehicle that's capable of going, drill a hole in the ice, put that vehicle through that opening in the ice, have it do a survey, and come back up to that hole. Very difficult, especially since the ice itself is moving. So that all that ice pack is rotating in a clockwise fashion. And so where you drill the hole one day is not where the ship is going to be the next day. It's a difficult thing to do. Some people have tried and not been so successful. I'm just telling you about this because it probably remains, in terms of things that we know are out there, next to Atlantis, which is also another thing that ocean explorers think about. It's one of those great things, as I said, like being the first to climb Mount Everest. All right, so I said to you that there's two things about the oceans. One is the excitement of exploration. We don't know what we're going to find. Even in shallow water, we don't know what we're going to find. Some of the latest things about cephalopods, octopuses especially, how they can change color and camouflage, how they can change shape, a shapeshift. Incredible animals. And my octopus teacher, I believe that's the name, was just out. Fascinating. And that captures just one little bit of these incredible creatures. So even in shallow water, we're learning an awful lot about the life that they're corals and how it's important to us. Climate too, the climate of the Earth, if we go back in time, it's the record of climate is captured by the ocean. It's in the sediments of the ocean, the deep ocean. It's in the ice cores of the Arctic and Antarctic. It's in tree rings. It's in corals. It's there. So if we want to understand the Earth's climate and how it changes over time, we know that the answers are out there. It requires some. It's like almost a tape recorder that's been running the entire time. But the trick is to go to the right places, collect the right information, and then have the ability not only to analyze it, but to understand what it's telling you. But the oceans will speak to you if you give them half a chance. And it's important that we do that. This image is actually mosaicked from real images of the planet by a company called WorldSat International. So you'll never get the Earth all sunny like this. And if you did, that'd be real problematic. That's not something we want. So this is not a real image, but it's so the whole Earth is sunny. And I think it's amazing because it shows you where the green is. It shows you where the deserts are. The one thing you can't see on here are us, humanity. And that's pretty interesting because, we're almost like a virus or a microbe on this planet, the 8 billion of us. Can't see us, but we've managed to change the chemistry of the oceans and the chemistry and temperature of the atmosphere, chemistry and temperature of the oceans as well. Now, you could make the argument, well, it's all a natural cycle. You know what? If you go out into the deep ocean, more often than not, if you catch a fish and look into the stomach contents, you'll find those little bright bits of plastic. That's not natural stuff. If you look in the flesh of the animals, you find flame retardants, herbicides, pesticides, pharmaceuticals. That's not natural stuff. So the point is that we've had that impact on the ocean. And the trouble is, this is one of the most important things. Dead zones we're finding popping up everywhere. They're bigger, they last longer. What happens in dead zones is you get nutrients running through rivers into the ocean, and they fertilize the ocean. So things grow that shouldn't be growing there, suck up all the oxygen and other things that should be there can't live, they die. The issue with that is that it's every single day, like flame retardants. It happens every single day. Winds blow it pretty much like a dust into the ocean. And so it's incremental. It's not an event. It's not an oil spill. Oil spills are great for the media. There's the boat out there, this giant ship that represents the oil industry. Often it's broken in half. Then oil is everywhere, the black tarry oil, the dead seabirds. That gets attention. But this other thing that you can't see, but really is devastating, and we're going to have to deal with it eventually, is something that the media really doesn't pay much attention to because it's not a dark, sticky mess that gets in the ocean. It comes in the form of crystal clear water. It runs off our city streets, off our farmlands, off our golf courses, and it happens globally. No matter where you live on this planet, what you put on the land in your backyards, on the city street, on your farmlands, eventually makes its way down into the sea. How we deal with this, I don't know. I mean, it comes down to, I think, pollution. It goes back to that old thing. We're managing to pollute the world's oceans. And again, like microbes, we live on the planet. You can't see us, but we're managing to have a huge impact on our home and on the environment that supports us. So that's the day Earth. I said you can't see us in that image, but at nighttime, voila, there we are. And those are the lights of Earth. On the left, I hope you can see this. On the left, you'll see the white lights in North America. Those are, you can call it the more developed countries, but lights from electricity. This again is made by WorldSat International Inc. So the white lights are the more developed electricity lights from electricity. The red lights that you see, if you go over to Europe and beyond into the Soviet Union, into Russia, sorry, I see those red lights. Those are gas flares from oil exploration. The brightest thing on Earth from looking at the Earth from space, those are the brightest things. Is these red gas flares. The blue, all the way over on the right, you'll see blue clouds, a little strip of blue clouds. Those are fishing fleets. And, this has been a long-term problem because not only are we managing to change the chemistry and temperature of the ocean waters. If you've got an aquarium, you know what that means. You're asking for trouble, and that's what we've done. So in a way, we're making life uncomfortable for the creatures that live out there. And then on top of what I mentioned, the oceans absorb about a third of the carbon dioxide we put in the atmosphere. Oceans absorb it. You put carbon dioxide together with ocean water, you make carbonic acid. And that's horrible if an animal wants to make shells or a skeleton out of seawater. So we've done that. And at the same time, we've got fishing fleets out there that have gotten really good at finding fish and basically killing them. Bycatch is incredible. And in some cases now, which I find amazing, even shark finning still going on. There are places where animals, whale sharks, big animals, whales, are transiting from one spot to another, and the fishing fleets are smart enough to know they can plunk themselves down on that route and just pick these animals off as they go on their way. And again, it's something that we need to get a grip on. I always think, though, that we need to be able to explain to people what the consequences are. And some people won't pay attention, but I think posed this the right way, people will understand this is not a joke. It's not just some scientific theory. The data is out there, and we need to find a way to deal with it, or we're going to suffer the consequences. Many people will argue that the COVID issue, the pandemic that we're talking about, is in part related to climate change. It's brought life together, microbial and macro life together in ways that it wouldn't be together. The whole microbe world, the microbiome, not something I've ever thought about. I had to take biology, 3 times when I was in graduate school to get through it. But it's one of the things that I see emerging rapidly is what is this microbiome on the planet? What's going on a microscopic level? And what we're finding out now is that it may have a huge impact on humanity. In fact, may be responsible in some cases related closely to extinctions. And I'm anxious to see what comes out next in that world. So that's the world at night. And again, like the first image, I think we take it for granted, the planet, that we can see something like this, so we understand it. We could plot on here. You can do it yourself. Look on the web. You'll find you can track flights for the whole globe. If you've never done it, you should do it. Fascinating how many airplanes, how many jets are in the sky at once. Same thing with ships, marinetraffic.com. If you look at that, you'll see ships that are transiting the oceans. In the U.S., 95% of the goods come by ocean transport. And, it's so looking at all that, it gives us an interesting perspective of what's going on now. And the challenge is to have the leadership to be able to, and it's probably not a person, but, someone's got to take the lead here and be more, I think, aggressive, but more also more understanding. I think I do as much speaking as I can in places like West Virginia or Kentucky or the Midwest. And there's a certain amount of resentment when a scientist shows up and says, you need to stop your mining coal. You got to stop. I don't care if your father did it or your grandfather did it, grandpappy or your great grandpappy did it. Stop. Same thing with fishermen. Whole communities were saying you need to stop because the stock is way down, so you need to stop. They need to, but there's a resentment for the way it's done. And so I think, a lot more care has to be taken into how you explain to these communities about what the important part is. And we got to find some way to make life tolerable for them. You can't just rip up people by their roots because I've got some theory that 300 years from now might make a difference.
Dave, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I want to make sure that we have at least about 10 minutes for audience Q&A.
Okay, yeah.
So do you mind
I'm wrapping up right now.
Okay, I don't want to.
No, I'm sorry. I had my timer. It's okay. My timer is misleading me. So the bottom line is the Earth. As in that first thing, take it for granted. We see that image. We don't think about the technology went into that. But at the same time, though, we don't understand what that image is telling us. We might think we understand it. We don't. And the oceans on that planet, 70% covers the planet. We've only explored a few percent, yet the air we breathe, every other breath of fresh air we take comes out of the ocean. The food we eat, billions of people rely on the oceans for protein. And the water we drink, 90+% of the rainwater, fresh water that we drink comes out of the sea. So we've got every reason to explore the oceans, to understand the oceans, and to put that into policy that will change our lives. Thank you very much.
So I'm going to dive right in. That was fantastic. Thank you so much. So Kramer and Amira, I think, are basically asking a question that riffs exactly on where you ended up in the talk, which is Kramer says that he or she has read that our oceans contribute to absorbing more CO2 than the rainforests, and wanted to ask you about that. And Amira was asking also about whether or not the oceans might be useful in reversing climate change.
Yeah. Well, okay. In the first one, I'm sorry. Can you repeat the first question again about?
Do the oceans absorb more CO2 than the rainforests?
Oh boy, that's a good question. And I don't, I'm not really a climatologist, so I know they absorb a third of the anthropogenic carbon dioxide that we put up there. It must be close, to that. But I confess that I don't really know that answer to be confident enough to tell you that they do. I know they're hugely important, and look at how much of the Earth they cover. So, and some people call them the lungs of the planet, but I've heard forests called the same. Yeah, they're important. They're critical. It's just that I don't know the percentage. Second question about the oceans. Climate's about two things. It's about temperature and precipitation. How hot or cold is it? Is it going to rain or no rain, snow or no snow? Now, the oceans move heat around in a way that the atmosphere can't. So heat comes in at the equator in the oceans, and then currents take it up to the North Pole and to the South Pole, and then it gets distributed around. So the oceans are slower than the atmosphere, but they carry huge amounts of heat. In the media lately, in the news, we talk about Europe going into abrupt climate change. That's because there's the Gulf Stream, for instance, carries heat from the equator up along the east coast of North America, and then plunks it off the west coast of Europe, Ireland, England. All that is nice and green because that heat carries humidity, and then winds blow across the top, carry rain onto the continent. On the other side of the Atlantic, same latitude, you have Labrador and Newfoundland, where not a lot grows. So if you start to cut down and reduce the vigor of that Gulf Stream, push it down so it doesn't carry heat up there anymore, the winds blow dry, and Europe starts to look a lot more like Labrador. And that kind of thing can happen, flip over in decades, 10, 20, 30 years, and it can persist like this mini ice age for hundreds of years. And so I'm seeing that reemerge now as a real possibility for Northern Europe. So we'll see. So yes, what we need to do is, again, we don't understand it enough to know how it impacts climate change specifically, but we know it plays a huge role in climate and moderating climate.
So Valeria asks, what are some ocean discoveries and achievements that you'd love to see happen in the coming decades?
Well, you know what? I can't predict, again, what we're going to find because, no one predicted finding the vent life along the middle. One of the most fundamental things about Earth, if you took all the water off the planet, that mountain range jumps out at you, and the life is immense there. In fact, in some places, we think we're looking at biogenesis. So if you wiped out all life on Earth, it's being created all the time at the bottom of the sea along that mountain range. You get a volcanic eruption, here's your lava, and oh, by the way, here's the building blocks of life, which is pretty amazing. It makes sense that why would life start 3 billion years ago and stop? That the Earth has been constantly generating new life. So that, I think, understanding what that's all about, where life comes from, is very possible that we're going to see that in the next few decades. From the world of shipwrecks and the like, who knows what we're going to find? There's an effort in the Mediterranean to find a Minoan ship. Minoans lived on Santorini. It used to be called Thera. The island, of course, blew up. And they had a great civilization with multi-story buildings, hot and cold running water. And they had to evacuate. And we think it's plausible that was Atlantis, that Plato was talking about, that particular area. So there's things like that too. So it's hard to understand, predict what we're going to find next. And I'm really happy to see that the Jim Camerons, the Ray Dalios, Victor Vescovo, Eric Schmidt, that they're out there, because it really does increase our chances of finding these incredible things.
So Emma asks, what does one need to study to get into this kind of work?
There are places that have oceanography courses that even as an undergraduate. I always think that you've got to be, and most people are hooked on curiosity and want to explore. I mean, it's kind of built into us. Trick is to keep that edge, that passion through your education, because sometimes they try to, the system tries to knock that out of you. But ultimately, you've got to bring something to the table. It can be just passion for exploration. It can be an expertise in the sciences, physics, chemistry, geology, that kind of thing. That's what we're looking at with the oceans, all those different disciplines. It could be engineering, which is, huge, every phase of engineering, because it's the oceans are so, observation is the cornerstone of science, and in the oceans, observation depends on technology. So every time we put something in the water that's new, we learn something new. So of all the things, I think, is to have find what drives your passion, what makes you passionate in terms of ocean exploration or any kind of exploration, and then follow that path. You can start, don't be a pest. Find someone doing the research you want to do, send them an email. I really like what you're doing. Try, don't they'll tell you if you're being too much of a pest, but get on their radar screen, and then eventually ask them, what do I need to do something like you do?
So you mentioned at the beginning that you had been a shoe salesman for 7 years. Like, what lit your fire to radically change your course?
I've got it here someplace. One day, I wanted to be a scientist when I was younger, because I thought I was related to Galileo. I wasn't. Turns out there's no relationship between Gallo and Galileo. But I was out every night with my telescope. I was making model rockets during the day, president of the math and science club, but my grades were horrible. I have ADD, if you probably can tell that. I have a nonverbal learning disability. So my teacher said, no good, forget about science, buddy. You need to do something else. I tried community college, bailed out quickly. I just didn't get it. And then sold shoes 7 years, one day in the shoe department, picked up a National Geographic 1976. I was in my mid-20s. I don't know where it went. And in that was an article by Bob Ballard about exploring the oceans with a submarine. One image. And I looked at that image and I said, that's what I want to do. And took that to the State University of New York at Albany, right across the parking lot from where I was selling shoes. 2 years later, got my bachelor's degree, made my first dive in that submarine, got my master's, and then eventually got my PhD. but I didn't get smarter. I didn't get, all it did was made me focus on what I wanted to do and let my passion and curiosity drive me. And in a way, before I knew it, I had a PhD. So I'll begin with one image in one magazine when I was in my mid-20s.
So we only have a minute or two left. I'm hoping I can get to 2 questions. I don't know. Maybe that's ambitious. So Amira, I think I got your question a little bit I stated it incorrectly, and Brooke, I think, asked a similar question. I hope I'm getting it right this time. The question basically is around small land masses and their impacts on currents and therefore ocean temperatures. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Your audio broke up.
Land masses and their impacts on currents and ocean temperatures.
Small land masses. Well, if you're talking about islands or underwater land masses, anything that impacts currents and the like, or has an impact on that, will have an impact on climate. Again, Panama, that I pointed out, had a huge impact on the climate because when Panama grew in that spot, it impacted the whole planet. In fact, because of that, we had snow for the first time up in the Arctic regions because of Panama. Same thing with the Med. Remember, I showed the pinching off of Gibraltar, that the Med dried up and the oceans became less salty, started to freeze, so sea level dropped quickly. So yeah, they do can have, depending on where they are, a huge impact on. Tiny things can have a huge impact. That's a lesson we need to learn about everything with the planet. The simplest things can have a huge impact.
I think that might be all the time we have. Anne, if you want to jump on, there she is. Do you want me to ask one more, or do we have to go? Anne, you're on mute. You're on mute.
I know, and I'm trying to hit the button. It wouldn't come on. I think one more.
All right, I'm going to throw in this one more. This one's interesting. Sarah asks, what impacts do you see from deep sea exploration on our culture? And I'm going to take it a little step further and say a lot of people will claim, Apollo's impact on culture and technology. I'm wondering if you see any parallels.
In terms of sure. Space, the budget for space exploration dwarfs ocean exploration. I think someone made a point that one shuttle launch, when we're using the shuttle, dwarfed a couple of years worth of ocean exploration funds. Space, I'm not knocking space exploration, very important for a lot of different reasons. And a lot of the technologies, of course, have filtered down to everyday use by people. And the oceans, probably the same is true. I can't off the top of my head think of any in particular. I'm sure as soon as we stop, 10 things will pop into my head. But again, what it does, I think, is the curiosity part. And I think when you take a chance, if you walk down to the edge of the coastline and look out there, you might think you know the ocean, but I'm not picking on anyone in particular, but you don't. There's a quick quote by Marcel Proust that said, "The true voyage of discovery, not so much in seeking landscape, but in having new eyes," which means, you can go out and explore, but the most important thing is how you think about the planet. And I think that's what ocean exploration, when you watch a documentary or see something in the media like an octopus that can shapeshift and all that, and you go, oh my God, that's amazing. That stuff really has an impact on a global scale about how we think of the sea.
Sweet. It was worth taking one more question.
Yeah, I think that's all the time we have for this. If many of you are going to be joining us on the other video Q&A where you'll be able to ask questions on screen. Thank you so much for an incredible talk. And now this part of the Q&A is over, so I'm going to pass it over to Anne.
Yeah, and really, my job is again to say thank you, Dave. We really, really always are grateful to you when you are able to make the time to join us on our stage, and I know our audience very much appreciates it. We hope that you will be back to be in our audience next week. We are going to be doing a film screening, and we know those are always popular. So if you haven't had a chance to watch it, go out on Netflix. It's called Dick Johnson is Dead. And the filmmaker, Kirsten Johnson, will be joining us in a talkback. And the moderator will be her brother, Kirk Johnson, who has already been on our stage. He is the Sant director of the National Museum of Natural History at the Smithsonian. And so it's an amazing twofer that we have for this event. And we're very excited. So the details will go out. We'll get that in your inbox, and we hope to see you back next week. So thanks again to David, and thanks to all of you for being here.
Sorry if we didn't get to your question. You had over 70 of them this week, and
I know.
we could, and they were great. So thank you for being so engaged.